Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special show that we're doing today. This is actually the first show that we're doing for Agency Nation, the industry-facing portal for TrustedChoice.com, where we are talking all things sales, marketing, and automation. And today, I'm going to be joined by Marty, Agather, Rick Morgan, and Jason Cass, kind of some familiar names to you, and we're going to discuss a question that actually Rick Morgan brought up. And it's the title of this show, and it's, are trusted relationships important to independent agent success? A very broad question, but a question that I think is important considering all the technology changes that are coming out, and something that I think is really the crux of what we're ultimately trying to do is build more relationships, and how does technology impact that? So first, right now we just have Rick and Marty. Jason Cass will be joining us shortly, but let's have Rick kind of just quick intro and kind of get us started here. Rick, what was the genesis of this question?
Okay, so I was just, I was thinking about relationships and trust, and we use that term all the time in our industry. I mean, it's a big deal. And so I started thinking, is this something is it a soundbite? Is it real? Is it even possible? And so that's when I sent an email to the three of you, basically, and said, okay, I've been thinking about this. Can we really, especially in the digital world, create trusted relationships? And I started breaking it down, and I thought about relationships just in general, and I wondered how many agencies really had relationships with all their customers. And then the next step would be, can you actually have trusted relationships? And then I asked myself, do customers really care? Is that important that they have a trusted relationship? Or is it something more like they just want people that are competent or accessible or something else with regard to this whole concept of trusted relationships? So I threw it out to you guys, and here we are.
Well, let's kick over to our newest member of the show here before we get to Marty. Jason, you are an agency owner, big proponent of building relationships in the digital space, and I would love to kind of get you kind of kick off our conversation and take Rick's question to the next level. Like, where do relationships fall? How do those relationships turn into trusted relationships? And do you think that agents still care?
All right. Well, can everybody hear me? I know my camera's messed up. You can. I was going to try and fix my camera, but Hanley threw the question on me, so that's completely fine. I got a lot to say about this, and I really want to give a shout out to you, Rick, because this is really a conversation that I think has been in the making here, and I really don't have an answer. And so I think as we go through this, I'm going to be able to kind of actually build my own answer, because that's one of the greatest things about these hangouts is we sit around in our own part of the country, we think about these things. When we come together, it kind of helps us finalize it, not only for the viewers but also for us on this call. I think the trusted relationships are definitely important. I think trust is something that we're always going to have to deal with. I mean, people are going to have to trust each other. I mean, it's the foundation of any relationship. I don't think we're ever going to get to a point in time in our history where people are going to say, wow, there's a bunch of people staying married for 30 and 40 years, and they didn't trust each other one bit the whole relationship. That's not going to happen, okay? So I kind of say that that's probably not going to happen in the insurance world either, or in any line of work out there when it comes to trust. But I think the trust has changed, and I think that that's probably where this thing will go, is that the amount of trust and the type of trust that people put in me, it's different than the trust that I need from my wife. It's different than the trust that I may need from my friend. It's this newfound trust. I mean, it's really, really hard for me to say what I'm really thinking, because I got a lot of thoughts right now. But I believe I'm going to start with saying, does anybody agree with me that it's a different level of trust that we're talking about here, as opposed to the past, or as opposed to other relationships we have with trust?
Marty.
Yeah, I think, Jason, you're onto something here, because I believe that the trust relationship is changing, but one of the biggest challenges we have is trust is one of these words that gets bandied about so frequently that it's almost impossible to help people just use it and abuse it, and it means nothing until you create the value that's behind it, right? So that whole trust me, the first thing I think of is, why would I ever trust you? So I think it's something that we have to earn, and really that's sort of where Rick started with the genesis of the question was, can we build that trust online? And I think there's a real opportunity for us to begin to talk about how we start building that trust online and how that's different than perhaps what I call transactional trust, which is now where I'm going to put my financial life in your hands. And how do we make the leap from moving from that online trust to transactional trust, which is where we need to be in that advisor relationship that we have with our clients? Rick?
Okay, but here's even another part to that, though. I'm thinking that in breaking down the trust part, I mean, there is the two parts. There's the relationship part and then the trust part. And if you've got 1,000 clients or customers or 2,000 customers, how many of those customers do you really have a relationship would be one question. The other is, though, I find it hard to believe, for example, that most insurance consumers trust the insurance company, right? I mean, that's big, that's big corporate America. And right now, the trust level of anything corporate America is not really high, especially in the financial end of things, with all of the banks and all of the stuff that's going on. But they do, now we've got the local independent agent, and maybe there's a potential of building trust there. But so again, Jason, with all of the customers that you may have, and Ryan, you were in an agency, and I was, and I'm thinking back, I wonder how many of those customers that I had I really ever, even in a traditional model, had a really trusted relationship with. And again, I'll go back to this question, does that customer really care? In other words, does it have to be a trusted relationship, or does it just something else that's important to them to do business with an independent agent?
So here's where I stand on this
Okay.
on this whole question. First, the answer, talking to the fact that let's say we have 1,000 clients, how is it possible to have a trusted relationship with all of them? My response to that is every client needs a different type or wants a different type of relationship and builds trust in different ways, right? So for some people, just knowing that you're doing their job, they trust you, right? They spent their 45 minutes face-to-face with you, or they spent that time on the phone. For them, that was enough to trust you, right? Yep. My financial advisor that I use, I just called him yesterday. I put money with him after an hour. We sunk up. We immediately, his philosophy matched my philosophy. We got each other. I knew that I could talk to him. And in that hour, he earned my trust, and I've been working with him for 5 years now. So what is the time period it takes to build trust? He doesn't do anything online. I can't even email him. I have to call him or physically go to his office, right? So it's like the exact opposite of every relationship that I want. But I trust him so much that I'm willing to abide by, the things that he works. Yeah. Now, other people would say, because he's not willing to text message me or email me or do these other things, I don't trust him, or I don't feel like I have a relationship with him. So I think that if we have 1,000 clients, there might be 17 different levels of trust and types of relationships that build that trust. And where I see this working in the favor of independent agents and in terms of technology is that what technology allows us to do is provide the full spectrum of possibilities to build trust, from the person who wants to come in the street and sit down with us face to face, all the way to the person who only needs to text message us once a year. Hey, is this the best rate you have? Text message back. Yeah, I did a full review. You're all set. No problem. Talk to you next year, right? That's a trusted relationship to some people because they know they can text you and that you're there. So I think it really comes down to giving them the full breadth of possibility.
Those are great comments, Ryan, and I think maybe what I'm hearing both you and Jason saying is that and you did say this, there's different types or levels of trust. I'm not sure that maybe that's true, but for sure what's true is that there's different definitions of trust, and maybe that, and perhaps what we've done is we've and I think it was Marty that said this, we've used the term so much that it's lost real meaning.
Yeah.
And we use it across the board. Everywhere we're always using that term, and so it's just a throwaway term almost anymore. It's like, oh
Well,
yeah, of course we need that. Go ahead, John.
Well, and is it who and I guess in a way I'm thinking this right now. It's kind of who do they trust? Just because they're doing business with you does not mean that they necessarily trust you. Maybe they like you, but they also trust maybe the fact that they know that if the company's probably going to pay, because very rarely do you hear of someone say, hey, I hit a deer and this company decided not to pay, or hey, I was in a wreck and they didn't pay for my wreck. You never hear that. So they trust the company, and they also know that they have the government, which is very, very deadly. That's another topic, that they trust the government will back them up and they will get their claim paid even if the company doesn't do it. So, they may have trust, but it may not be in you specifically. And I think that's exemplified by the online directs. Come on, they're showing a lizard or a caveman or a guy driving down the street with money blowing off of him, and people are like, yeah, I'm going to do insurance, I'm going to do business with them. Whether we like that or not, and that's the customer you want, that's another topic. But I'm saying, who do they trust in? They trust that Geico's going to pay their claim. So they trust that Nationwide is going to pay their claim. If it happens to be Jason is their Nationwide or Allied agent, then that's just the way that it is. So there's different levels of trust. It's also who do they trust. I also think that it just comes down to guys, let's move our own ego out of the way here. Ryan's talking about his financial guy. I'm sorry. I don't want my financial guy touching me, okay? Send me once or twice a year how much is in my IRA, and if it went way up, I'm going to say, damn, the stock market's doing great. If it went way down, I'm going to say, damn, the stock market's doing terrible. Never once am I going to sit here and go, you know what, I'm calling Jay, which is my financial guy, and I'm going to talk to him because I don't know if I can trust him. No, stay away from me. Tell me if my money went up or down, and whenever I have more to give you or I have a life change, I'll contact you. Maybe it's different with insurance, I don't know, but if I wasn't in insurance, send me an email or something every once in a while, but I'm doing business with you. Stay away from me. Make it easy for me to do business for you, and that's what I want. I think sometimes we get ahead of it and think that we need to build that trust by touching them and being there all the time for them.
Well, what you're saying, dude, was exactly my point, is that there's 4 of us on this call. If there were 10 of us on this call, there would be 10 different feelings towards what trust is with their financial advisor, say, right?
True.
And it's the same exact thing for property and casualty insurance agents. And this is one of the things that I think we really need to consider when we're talking about this word trust, is that how we have done it is, this is what trust means to me. I'm the guy behind the big oak desk. This is what trust means to me. So I'm going to do this to my clients and so that they trust me. And that is just not how trust is built. Trust is built through how can I have 15 different clients? They might all build trust with me 15 different ways, and I have to be flexible enough to account for all of those.
So yeah, and so is it that though? Or is it that the fact? What I'm hearing also is that we want a certain level of accessibility, convenience. We want people to respond to us the way we want to be responded to, and you both had different ideas about that. And we want somebody that's that we feel is confident. Now maybe that's trust, that they're going to do the right thing or they're going to get the right coverage. But that's a professional trust of some sort versus sort of a personal relationship. And when we think about social media, we've talked so much about this in the social sphere, about building relationships, building trust. I'm wondering what we really are saying, I guess, is where this all kind of bubbled up to me. Because it's really what that customer is desiring.
Yeah. So let me ask this question, and Marty, you take the first crack at it. How does brand impact trust? Because I have a whole soapbox that I want to jump up on here, so I'm going to go last. But because I think that brand and branding are one of the most important aspects of growing a business and are the absolute last thing that independent agents think about, for the most part. And that's a broad sweeping stroke, but for the most part, it's one of the last things we think about. And I think that it is ultimately probably the most important thing that we have moving forward because, well, I'll get on that soapbox later. Marty, how does brand impact trust?
All right, before we get to brand, I want to go back to one thing, a point that you were making, and sort of spin it. I think historically we've looked at, to Jason's point, that trust and how do I deal with my clients. It's been a one-size-fits-all approach. And the challenge we've had is that, as we've just identified here, 4 individuals, 4 different ways that we want to interact with a trusted financial professional. We have to figure out how we deal with people and give them the level of service and attention that they need so that we keep that trust. Because what begins to erode that trust is when you deal with me in a way that I don't think matches the way I want you to deal with me. And that leads us right into brand. Your brand is your overarching concept and should define who you are as a professional and who your firm is in an overarching way, and it needs to be coordinated, contiguous, and all related so that when I see your brand and I see who you are, those two things mesh and they are in concert with one another rather than this grading thing. So if your brand is all completely and totally formal, and now all of a sudden I meet Jason and he's in a red fleece because it's cold down there in Centralia, then that doesn't work with me, right? So how do we make those things? And so I'll kick that off. And Jason, give me your thoughts on personal brand and that kind of stuff.
Well, first of all, it is cold. Okay, it's very cold, and
is that why your face is dirty?
Maybe, dude. This is miserable. I mean, this No Shave November is tough, man. This thing itchy. I can't stand it. I can't wait till it's over. But for all you watching right now live, this is awareness to men's health that I'm got a dirty face. I'm really torn up about this brand, so I'm going to absolutely agree with everything that Marty is saying and what other people are saying because it's just the way it is. But I'm also going to this point in time where I don't want to get too far off on this, but I think I'm getting rid of JDC Insurance Group's Facebook page. I'm just not confident enough, and I'm letting my mind go through this. And here's what I'm doing. I'm not taking it down. I'm going to rename it to Jason Cass JDC Insurance Group because I've thought about this for a while. People don't connect. First of all, everybody that always reaches out to me on Facebook for insurance, I would say over 80% of the time, they come to my Jason Cass profile page. Even though they come and they see all this stuff I'm doing on JDC and talking about insurance and not about insurance and whatever I'm talking about over there, they come to me and they personally message me and say, hey, I'd like to get a quote. I could probably say I count less on my hand of the hundreds of leads I've received off of line that I've received from someone going to my page. But here's what's crazy. My producer that I have that's working in my agency now, he created his own Facebook page, Ryan Sotman JDC Insurance Group. He's getting way more engagement than I ever got at the beginning and at the end. Now I'm able to help him learn things and teach him things, but he's getting way more engagement. And he's also getting people messaging him, talking about insurance, asking about quotes. And I'm sitting here going, man, this cat in the 2 months he's had this open is getting way more requests because I believe, and I have to think it through, it's more of a personal nature. People connect with that person. And I think if we look at it strategically, that's the one thing we can do different than all the directs and all the captives and all the nationals. This is a way for us to say, I'm not Safeco. I'm not State Farm. I'm not these people. I'm not JDC Insurance Group. I'm Jason Cass. JDC Insurance Group is the legal name that these contracts are written through, but I'm that guy. That goes back to trust. Does that matter? Does some people, I mean, there's a lot of people connecting with Geico that have no relationship with an agent, with all of the direct writers. So we're kind of mixing and matching here, but I think in some ways personal brand is just as important as company brand, and I think it's actually sometimes a lot more important. And then that goes into the trust factor of who do I trust? Do I trust a corporation or do I trust the personal brand must? I'm not saying that's one straight answer, but I think these are things we have to think about.
Can I riff on that?
Hit me.
What I think we're seeing is a sort of a shifting of the branding message. The brand for the business is really about longevity. It's about your place in the community. It's about the systems that are in place that support the operation of the business. The real branding and the relationship and ultimately the trust factor is at the individual level. I have far less trust, and you said it, Jason, I have far less trust in State Farm or Allied than I do in Jason Cass.
Right.
And that is because Jason Cass is my guy, and I know exactly who he is, and when I look him in the eye, he gives me sympathy, and he says, Marty, that really sucked that that tree fell on your car. We're going to get it fixed.
Marty, I'm going to push back on you there. I'm going to push back on that point you just made. So, currently today, State Farm Insurance has over $8 billion in written premium, and last year they grew 5%. So think about how much that is. $8 billion in written premium, and they grew 5%.
$400 million.
Here's why I think that happens, and they continue to dominate. And we can say whatever we want about the faceless monster, but people trust that brand. They trust that brand. And I think the reason that we push back on personal brand versus corporate brand is because it's hard as hell to build a corporate brand that people trust, because you have to humanize a business. These are incredibly difficult things to do, and people that do them well get paid a lot of money, right? So it's very hard on an individual basis. However, I believe that the reason that the Geicos and the State Farms and these directs and captives continue to win is because people trust the brand on the outside of the box, right? They trust the box. Driving down Main Street, you see a big red State Farm sign, and you see the Johnson Insurance Group, which could look like anything, and you see the Stevens Insurance Group on the other side, and it looks completely different, and one of them's got neon, and one of them's wood, and it's all different stuff, and when they look at those three options, they say, well, I kind of know what that one stands for, and it seems like they pretty much have their stuff together. I'm going to go with State Farm and give them the first shot because I trust that package. Now, right. I'm not saying that we can't beat that, but it's branding the corporate business as a whole that really makes them so powerful, because people know, even if they know, and this is another thing, people sometimes realize that they're choosing a lesser product, but they trust the brand so much that they would rather go with the brand they trust than this thing that they could walk into the Johnson agency and they have no clue what they're going to get. They have absolutely no idea what they're going to get when they walk in there, and they know that if I walk into State Farm, this may not be the best possible thing, but I can trust that I'm getting something that will work for me. And
how many times have we thought that in the way we eat? We're in some place and we're not familiar with any place to eat, and it's like, I'm really hungry right now, but I really don't recognize any place, so I'm just going to go to McDonald's. And I know as I'm driving to McDonald's that this is probably not the most healthy thing for me, but I got an hour I got to eat, I'm in a place I don't really know, or I'm trying to make a decision that I'm not sure of my surroundings, and I don't know that place and this place. I know exactly what I'm going to get at McDonald's, whether it's whether it's cookie cutter or not. So you're making a very good point there, Ryan. And
those are really great points. And branding a corporate brand is extremely difficult, and it clearly takes huge budgets. But what I think so what's happening though with some of the companies or new companies, and this is part of what agencies can do as well, I think, is that they are attaching a personal brand to it. I mean, clearly that's what Apple did. And Microsoft, actually. I mean, Bill Gates was the face of Apple. Microsoft, and Steve Jobs was the face of Apple. And there was a personal brand, and so it humanized the brand. And Scott Monty did that in social media early on with Ford Motor Company. It was the same thing. If you were out there on Twitter in the early days, Scott Monty was what you thought about when you thought Ford, for God's sake. He created such a strong personal brand and the cool things that he was doing with it, that all of a sudden you had a different opinion of that company. And so so that's one part of it. The other is I think this idea of a personal brand is very important, and I think for independent agents to do that, and because we don't have the budget that Jason, you don't have the budget that State Farm has, I think to do what you're talking about is extremely important. So I think of my own behavior on social media. I rarely pay any attention, particularly on Twitter, to corporate brands. It's all about the person, the human that's sitting there. Facebook is pretty much the same way. I don't want to listen to a corporate brand, even if they do cool stuff. I want to talk about the people that are in that brand. So that gets back to agencies. If they're going to build relationships, if I was an agent today and I had a whole bunch of producers, I'd want every one of them to have a personal brand. I'd want to have my staff to be out there and have personal brands, because that's what then humanizes the agency. And hopefully the value proposition, and this gets into the branding concepts that you were talking about, Ryan, is that you've got to have a consistent brand message and value system for that brand that filters down and that everybody delivers. So to some degree, Jason, to really simplify it, you and your producer should have the same set of JDC values that are somehow delivered through each of your personal brands, I think.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And that's how you have an opportunity then to strengthen the overall JDC brand. But yes, the people are going to do business with individuals, and I think that that's what's so difficult for so many agencies, to open the door and really encourage people to get out there and create personal brands.
Right. No.
Yeah, I think the key here is, and I'm 100% with you on the Scott Monty and the personal brand humanizing the larger corporate brand. And I think where we start to go wrong is we try to humanize our business with the corporate branding face, right? So JDC Insurance Group can be a great insurance resource, but it will never be a human being, right? So so when you're thinking about social media profiles in general and this whole concept, it's your JDC insurance page is where you have your resources. You want to learn more about us? Here's what we do. Here's the pictures of us in the community. Here's this thing. You want to learn more about me as a producer or as me as a person, you come to my personal profile where I reflect the corporate brand, but here's the human. If you try to make the corporate brand human, it, again, to what Marty was talking about, there's this complete disconnect between what you're seeing and what you're getting. It doesn't make sense that a corporate brand would be human. It makes sense that a corporate brand would be filled with valuable resources inside that industry and inside that niche, but it's the people that it's almost, think about it like a solar system, right? Like the sun is your corporate brand, and you have all these, satellites and planets rotating around it. Those are your employees, adding to the density of what this thing really is. And that's how I think you can, because you're always going to have that disconnect if you try to humanize a corporate brand. Now, I think in your case, Jay, it makes sense because of the size of your agency that you could make that move over. But I think for maybe an agency with 15, 20 people, you want to keep that Facebook page, but empower your employees to start to create their own personal brands with their own pages that kind of reflect the corporate brand. So that way, it's consistent.
And for anybody watching, I'm not really going. I'm just thinking about that, because what you're saying is right, Ryan. It's just, it got me thinking. But now what you're saying, to have this over, using it as a resource and then everybody else playing out underneath that, maybe that's what we're doing, and that's maybe why he's getting so much success on his page that he just created. So
yeah, I think you have to have a corporate presence because of what Ryan said. People go there to get the information. So you have, a corporate presence on Google Plus and Facebook and places like that. But even in that, the way you write about who you are, I think you can then strengthen the personal branding concept through that corporate page by talking about the people and who you are and all those kinds of things, and actually through your own website and blog and positioning, say, here's where all of these people are, and encourage, you can encourage people to be very active on Facebook or doing their own personal blogs or whatever as employees of whatever your organization is. And I think that's where the strength really starts coming coming to be.
I want to bring this thing full circle. I think where we just got to is exactly where we started, Rick, when you sent the first email out on this topic. And that was, can we create trust through our social media activities? And the point is, all of those resources that we just encapsulated, you, Rick, and Jason before you, are where I go online when I know nothing about you. I don't have the big red sign out front of my building as the attractant to bring people in, right? But I got news for you. If the agent sitting behind the desk is a loser, it was harm for very long, right? But we don't have that advantage. So how do we do that? We have to bring in people by allowing them to gain trust in us in their own ways. And to one consumer, that might be because you are the insurance expert of the world. To another consumer, it might be that you have a human face and you're part of the community, or that you have a hobby that individual likes, and suddenly you've got a commonality. So that's how we use these social areas to generate that trust, which then turns into clients for us.
Yeah. There's one more point I'd like to make on this that I think is incredibly important to talk about, and that's the idea that geography no longer builds trust, or at least is not a primary factor in trust. It used to be that, before we had the internet and accessibility to all these different options, if you were the guy on the corner, I trusted you because you were the guy on the corner. Today, I don't need you to be on the corner anymore. I could be doing business with a guy in Montana. If he treats me well and can service all my needs and communicate me in the way I need it to be communicated with, I trust him, and I'm completely okay with using him. Geography I'm not saying it's not a factor. It's just not a primary factor in building trust. You're not given the benefit of the doubt of trust because you're on the corner anymore. People have options, and they can go past this geography. Man, I could use the guy that's 15 miles away, the guy that's 20 miles away. I would still consider them local.
So what you just said, though, Ryan, it was kind of got what I was starting out with, and that was, you said if he's convenient and he communicates with me the way I want to communicate with, and that's before trust. In other words, that starts happening. There's a certain level of activity. You probably also want to know that he seemed knowledgeable. So it seems to me that there's a bunch of things that we do, and it's a long-term process to build what you would really call trust. And there's probably a continuum of level of trust that happens as a result of that. And I think that's where I was coming from at the beginning, because I think we throw out trust and relationships like, okay, if you're out there and you're in social, or even if in traditional methods of communicating, that automatically you do this and somehow trust happens. And it doesn't quite that way. I mean, it's a process where there's got to be honesty, transparency, competency, all of these things that have to be present before a relationship is built and before trust is added to that relationship.
Right, and I really agree. And I mean, when you look back on it, we're thinking about we're talking about a relationship. I mean, what I mean by that is I'm saying we're talking about insurance relationships, which, we could talk about basketball relationships, or we could talk about different relationships, but it's all about relationships. So the basis of them all work the same. And it's kind of like, there's a certain level of trust. I go back to analogies. They always help me outside, and I think they do a lot. But like for that girl to finally go out with me, you know what I mean? There has to be some kind of minimum trust for her to even say yes, which there's had to be some correspondence of some type that started that. And then as it goes, that trust delivers. I got to tell you, though, from a practical sense, I think that Ryan Hanley hit it on the head about 20 minutes ago when he said that this is the reason why social and digital is so important, is because everybody has their own thing. And I think that as a business owner, that's one of my hardest parts. And I think that, Ryan, you hit it right on, because it used to be just in the way of advertising, it was just the TV or just the radio or just the chamber, and you had those little things. But now I have to be in so many different areas, in so many different things. But what's amazing is by just being in that area, you've already established that little bit of trust. So let me say this, just what Marty said a minute ago. Maybe it's a hobby. So if I create a Facebook page for my agency, but as a side shot that talks about hunting and fishing, okay?
Or squirrel on a St. Louis baseball field.
Or thank you very much. Or my St. Louis Squirrels that I have. You know, that thing is still growing. And so I create this other profile out there, and I start attracting to it people. People kind of trust me right off the bat because I'm a St. Louis Cardinals fan. You see what I mean? Now, that doesn't mean that's going to trust me to do business, but that's that first step that person who you were asking out on that date had some kind of little trust to at least say yes, to know that you're maybe not a mass murderer.
But that's why with branding, that's exactly why branding becomes so important, because when you do that, you're creating a persona, and a brand set of values. So you're a fan of the Cardinals, and that's a value.
Yeah. It is a value, and all of a sudden people feel like, hey, okay, he gets me. Maybe not at all level, but he gets me.
Right.
Now I'm willing to take that to the next step to see if that, and I think that's the power of blogging. Okay, there's a lot of different powers of blogging, but I think that's the power is March 11th of 2011, a guy reads my post during the Japanese earthquake that goes out, and I write a blog about earthquake insurance and how it's got a separate deductible. That blog that he reads, living in Oklahoma, somehow it got through. I posted it on my sites, got to him in Oklahoma. He liked it, filled out my subscription form, became a member on my blog. Now he gets my blog. Last year on October 9th, he calls me and says, hey, I own a engineering firm for oil and gas. I fly down there in December 18th, the exact date. I wrote the business on a BOR. February 15th was about $16,000 in commission. The trust started back on March 11th when he read that blog of mine, and he said, hey, I have no idea who this cat is, but that's something that was of value to me. Does that mean that I could have called him up the next day and he probably would have done business with me? No. But what happened was he read many of these things, and that trust got deeper and deeper, and he finally came to me and said, got down on his knee and said, Jason, will you marry me? Oh, shit. Anyways, that's what I'm talking about. So, anyways.
But that's the whole deal, is that trust is built in the digital space the same exact way that it's built in the real world. It's the same exact thing. It's just different ways of communicating. The same value structure, the same way that we do it. There are people who I've met that I have known for years, and I still don't trust them as far as I can throw them. There are people that I've known for 15 minutes, and I trusted them immediately, right? Sure. And it's all that what are you giving off? What are you presenting to me? Some people, hey, I needed to read their book before I trusted their opinion. I needed to hear them on a podcast before I heard their opinion. I needed to meet them in person. Some people, first instance, you got it. So I think that trust is built the same way. For this guy, he said, okay, this is a guy that I kind of like what he's saying, but it took him 8 months or so to be like, I trust this guy. This is the guy I want.
And then 2 years, Ryan. It took him 2 years.
Oh, 2 years. Okay, sorry, I had my math wrong. 2 years.
Well, no, 2 years though. I mean, that's so that's when someone would have said to me, if I was doing that, if someone was writing that blog besides me, they would have said, Jason, when am I going to get my ROI off this? You know what I mean? You have no idea that what you're doing right now could be so powerful in the future. It may be tomorrow, it may be next year, it may be 5 years, but it's going to come around. It goes back to what Mom and Dad always says. You're never going to do any work that's not going to go rewarding. It's the same thing.
So all I would say, though, is that consistency counts. Had you just done that one post on the earthquake, odds are good it wouldn't have had the fruit that it did.
That's true. It's true.
What is it? 90% of success is showing up, right? I mean, it's all these same things: consistency, competency. Rick listed a bunch of them. These are all little tiny factors that have different weight inside of our own trust equation for each individual person or business that we meet. And over time, we have to build on all of them. Over time, you show consistency. You keep showing up on your blog. I'm dedicated to my business. I'm proving, if nothing else, you may not even read my posts. Like I had a guy call me one time and say, I don't really read your stuff, but I see that you post a lot. Can you give me a quote? Right? To him, it was just the fact that for 2 years, I had been consistently creating content, and finally he just said, you know, if he's going to write this much stuff, he's got to know what he's talking about. Well, you know, whether that's true or not is a different story. But for every single person, I feel like the equation of trust is different, and we have to be flexible to capture it.
Well, and also, I always sub this because I love talking about blogging, but I love talking about blogging when it comes to trust, Ryan, because anybody who says, I don't know if a blog's good, or I don't know if a blog will build trust, question, take yourself back to the 1980s, 1990s, because I was little at the time, but I remember seeing it myself. If you're reading the newspaper, and you see that article that someone's got in there from the local tax guy or from the local insurance person or whatever, who writes a fine little topic in there or an article that says, hey, here's something you should be worried about. That guy was in there every week or every month or whatever. And after a while, no matter who you are, if you read that paper every day, you started thinking to yourself, this guy has got to be an expert in this topic. This is going to be someone I trust, even though I maybe not know him, but he's giving away all this information, and I've read a little bit of it. He sounds like he knows what he's talking about. So that's the same thing as blogging today. It's the same thing, except now you have more control, and you don't have to go to the editor and kiss their butt to get the thing in the paper, and you can send it out whenever you want, how you want, how long it's going to be. You know, if you want to cuss in it, you can. I wouldn't advise that, but you can. And what I mean, you have no constraints, and so I think it's the same thing. So we have to admit that person back then was the person that was seen in the country community as like, hey, that's a go-getter right there. He's really dedicating his time. It's the same thing we're doing today. It's the same exact thing, but it builds trust, and I think trust is huge. And so I think I want to say it to all you listeners out there, everybody listening and watching live, recorded, whatever, next year, however it could be. Stop real quick and say to yourself, how am I building that trust? Now, don't let your eyes roll back in your head and your eyes glaze over or whatever. Really think to yourself, how am I building that trust? Because you're still listening to this hangout. And you heard Hanley say at the beginning that, you know, there's 17 different million ways that we could build trust. Let's just say 20. I mean, really sit there and look at some of those ways. Am I communicating differently? How am I building those relationships? Are we all on the same level? I mean, do you have people in your agency? I heard an agent say this about a month ago. He said, man, sometimes I don't even trust what my producers are doing out there. Hello! You know, if you can't change your people, folks. You know, that's a big thing. And not only, but you know what? He's thinking of, man, this guy's sitting on a $100,000 book. But how much constraint is he putting on? And as I think Marty said, how much confusion is this person getting by getting different signals of different trust and building the brand of who you are and what could I expect? Am I going to get like I do at McDonald's? I mean, people, as you were talking earlier, they know what they're going to get, Ryan. The reason why Geico is so successful is because people know you pick up the phone, you dial that number, it's going to take 15 minutes, and I'm going to get a price. That's just the way that it is. I know that. I don't know that necessarily when I call JDC Insurance Group. Just being honest, me being Jason, they don't necessarily know that, you know, and I think that that's a big important factor to what's going on. So I think that people out there, you really need to stop and ask yourself this question. And then I'm going to throw this out to listeners and to you guys right here. Is this something we've been hearing about brand for 10, 20, 30 years? We all hear about Starbucks and Apple and McDonald's. And I think that's one of the issues why it's hard for us to sell it to agents, is they say that that's nothing like me, but yet it is. Is this something that you're going to be able to avoid in the year 2020? Are you going to still be able to have deaf ears to this and still be able to be the agency for the consumer of what they need?
That's an amazing subliminal drop for Jason's new book that's coming out called Agent 2020.
I actually was going to say 5 years and 10 years, and I'm thinking, no, I'm going to say 2020. But yes, but no, but seriously, I mean, is that in 5 to 10 years, are you going to be able to still get away with this?
Yeah.
Well, they're not getting away with it today. I mean, that's the God's honest truth. Is that the reason we're having these conversations is the same conversations we've been having for, Rick, you know, you talk all the time, you know, these are the same, we're facing the same issues with different technology. Marty, you say the same thing. And it's, you know, the agents that win are the agents that take this stuff on, right? Like, you go to the conferences, you go to your state conference, or you go to the national convention, or you go to the different mastermind groups and different groups that get together. The agents that are sitting at the head table, you know exactly what they do, what they write, what they stand for, and you recognize their logo. and you're going, oh, we can't do that. Yes, you can. You can do these things. You just have to choose to want to be that successful. And, you know, you can't make people want to reach that level. These are hard things to do. It takes a ton of work. But I think that if you dedicate yourself to it, it proves itself out over and over again. So, you know, we've kind of beat trust up. We've been talking for 45 minutes. It's been an amazing conversation. I don't want to go too much longer because I think you know, we'll just burn the topic out, and there's always another day to get back on here and do this again. So let's start with Rick. Rick, kind of give us your final thoughts on trust, and then let everyone know where the best place to connect with you is online.
Okay. I think that instead of doing what I think about trust, what I really hope we do now is we get to share this and people can chime in, and I'd like to continue the conversation. I'll put a shameless plug in for Brand Camp next May.
Yes, please.
Through 19 in St. Louis, where this is the kind of conversation that takes place, and we encourage everybody to come and join that. The best, you know, people can reach me on all of the social outlets looking for Rick JMIV. I've always used that from the beginning because I didn't even know it was going to be important. You know, getting on Twitter and doing all of that at the time. You can reach me at rick@artrike.com for email, and yeah, that's it.
Great, Marty.
Rick, hit the date again because we kind of stepped on you for Brand Camp.
May 17 through 19 in St. Louis, and it's gonna immediately precede the Augie meeting and the ACT meeting, which will follow on that. So we put the 3 events in the same time frame at the Magnolia Hotel, which is a very cool venue in St. Louis.
Yeah.
Jason, you can just drive right over.
I know, that's why you're having it there.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I want to thank everyone for showing up today. This has been a really great conversation for everyone who's watching this either on YouTube or on agencynation.com. Below the video are going to be links to connect with Jason, Marty, and Rick, and some of the resources that we talked about today. I would encourage everyone to visit growprogram.com, Jason's site. Check out Agency Nation. If you're not watching this video on Agency Nation, subscribe to our YouTube channel. And I will be at Brand Camp. Marty will be at Brand Camp. Rick will be at Brand Camp. Jason will be at Brand Camp. It is going to be a who's who of deep thinkers, and even you know, they're gonna we let Jason in, even though we know that he doesn't think that deep. So, but I do think I want to say. So here's my thing. Here's my final pitch about Brand Camp for those that are still watching the video here. Is I went to this 3 years ago. It has killed me that I haven't been back the last 2 sessions. 'Cause I know it's not actually annual. Sometimes a little more than a year. But incredibly powerful event for this one reason. It is conversation driven. It is audience engagement, people talking about topics that impact the industry and impact our business. And there are just very few events where the people who show up get to be part of the actual conference itself. It's not just talking heads on a stage. It's very participation driven, and you'll absolutely walk away with something valuable. So, so with that, we're gonna get out of here. Thanks everyone. Subscribe to the channel, connect with everybody on the call, and we'll see you guys at Brand Camp.